senior. You've got Corey Porter, a senior at Sykeston, their first cousin. You've got kids on both sides that are related up and down the list. Scott Central's 2 losses that year were to Dallas Lincoln down in Texas, and then they actually lost a game to Notre Dame that year. In January, they had a funny loss
at home too. And Notre Dame, I was at that game. They played a great game. They had a kid named Jacob Tolbert that played out of his mind that game, and Scott Central just didn't look like themselves that night.
And that Notre Dame team gave Sykeston all they wanted. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so they were, this is 2 teams that are, evenly matched or whatever. But anyway, we thought we'd get the rematch in 2011. For whatever reason, we did not get the rematch. I don't know who didn't want to play, but I'll just say this: these colors don't run. We'll play anybody, anytime, any place. And for whatever reason, the game didn't happen. And so here, all these years later, we do get a rematch. And Sykeston fans they roll deep on Twitter. And so they won the game. On the other side, you had Bernie win the game. So you had Bernie pull off, one massive upset after another all through this bracket until they got to the finals, and then Bernie against Sykeston. And I thought, okay, maybe Bernie's finally met their match now, because Sykeston has a lot of fans on Twitter.
Right.
But there's actually some Bernie fans with the blue check mark by their name. Some Bernie fans have went high places in the world.
That's influence.
Yes, they do. And so Bernie ended up winning this entire bracket. Not saying that would have happened in real life, but I thought it was really cool that this team, which was such a great team, got, this kind of respect all these years later. And I said this, I think it's fascinating. Bernie has had 3 teams actually finish second in the state, got beat in the state championship game. And they've had this team that lost in the finals of their district and was voted number 2 in the final coaches poll. But if you ask anybody from Bernie or just general basketball fans from Southeast Missouri, this is the team they still talk about, is the team that, didn't get there. It's the what-if team, And so I thought that was a really cool part of the bracket. Again, just all the basketball talk that it brought out.
Yeah, especially in a time where people have no sports to watch. It was neat for them to talk and interact about it on Twitter and discuss the old teams and how they play against the new teams and the different players and names that it brought up throughout the whole thing.
So, kind of going through it, and if you could pick your own Final Four teams, and it doesn't have to be from any particular bracket or anything like that, but what 4 teams do you think, if you could pair them all up and say, of all the teams that we've talked about and that, you looked at the bracket and everything like everybody else, what 4 teams would you have picked out?
Well, the first one, and we talked about them earlier, is probably being the team that would win the whole thing in real life, would be the Tyler Hansborough senior year Poplar Bluff team. I think it's just they had 2 NBA players. Ben didn't play as much as Tyler did in the NBA, but he made it. He was on the roster. He got some run. I think they were both conference players of the year in college at Power 5 schools. They were both All-Americans, I believe. I think Ben was. It's hard to look past that team, and it wasn't just those 2 guys. They had some dudes around them, too, that could play. Then I think you'd have to pick your best Charleston team, whoever that is, whether it's a Ricky Frazier team or a Lamont Frazier team. One of those teams is in your Final Four. And then whoever your team from Scott Central is, whether it's Marcus's senior year, Bubba and Bobby's year, or whether it's the first one with Otto Sr. And then just throw somebody in there for the 4th team, another Charleston or Scott County team. You can't really go wrong. There's just so many good teams. Derek Tipler, New Madrid team. But I think the way it worked out was neat to see also.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick 4, and I'm the one that seeded it, I think, like you said, the Hansborough team from Poplar Bluff, you could argue they're the best team. I mean, they won it back-to-back years in the biggest class. They beat the number 1 team in the nation. I mean, their resume is as good as anybody, just their accomplishments. But then when you look past their accomplishments and look at their actual players, they had 2 guys that, played a little bit in the NBA. I mean, Tyler had a good career in the NBA.
Right.
One of the greatest college players ever. And then Ben Hansbrough was the Big East Player of the Year, and he had a little stint there in the NBA also. And those guys, were great high school players. I would put them in there. I'd put the '90 Charleston team in there. That was the best Charleston team. With Lamont Frazier, and then I would probably put the '90 Scott Central team in there. Because that team lost by 2 to that Charleston team. So if we're going to say that Charleston team is all-time great, and they are, then that Scott Central team's also all-time great.
Right.
And then for my fourth team, I could go one of three ways. I could put another Scott Central team in there, put the Otto Jr. and Bobby Hatchett team in there. I could put one of the Portersville teams, Jamie Booker, Antonio Sykes team in there. I could put a second Charleston team in there with Corey Frazier and that bunch of guys. With the Carlos McCauley, that was a great, great Charleston team. Or I think the Sykes team is at least in the conversation.
Right.
I think they're on that level also. They were a really, really good team. And, so just to put one team from another school in there, I would say probably that Sykes team, 2011 Sykes team. Yeah, nobody beat them. And they were a great team. They were. I enjoyed watching that team as much as any team I've seen in the last, 10 years or so. The way they played together, the way they moved the ball, I think Coach Hollifield does an awesome job. And so, that would probably be my final four, and it would be hard to say that anybody would beat Poplar Bluff, but I tell you what, any four of those teams could beat any four of those teams on a given night.
Yeah,
and that's the great thing about
styles and matchups.
It is, and that's the great thing about it is just looking back at what made some of these teams great and trying to find some of the common denominators. Obviously, great coaches, great players are a common denominator, but then also just looking at the pressure, the defense, the rebounding, that is just a hallmark of Southeast Missouri basketball, that when we have really good teams go up there, they'll, whether it's Derek Tipler's New Matter team or Lamont Frazier's Charleston team or Marcus Timmons' Scott Central team, they have a lot of the same things in common. And that's just this general style of play that we have. Whether it's fast or whether it's slow. Charleston played a lot slower than Scott Central did, but they both did the same thing. They pressured you and they hammered you on the glass.
Right. Southeast Missouri basketball.
That's right. And so it's a lot of fun talking about all this basketball. And like you said, especially right now, we don't have a lot else to do. So we've got a couple other things coming up that we're going to talk about in the next couple of days, we hope.
Yeah.
Summer basketball, we're starting to get some guidance and direction from the people at the Department of Education and the governor and all that, just to say what we're going to be able to do and not be able to do. So, good or bad, at least we're going to know something.
Right. We'll know something, and hopefully we can play some ball soon.
That's right. And then, also just talking about this Bulls documentary, The Last Dance. And so that's been a lot of fun to watch.
And you talk about needing some sports right now for people. It's the biggest show in the world, and that's been awesome to watch. And I think everybody's kind of been glued to their TV on Sunday nights watching it.
That's right. Yeah, it's been really, really good to watch. And so, Tobe, it's always good talking basketball, and hopefully, we can come back and do this again this week, and we'll have a little bit of information for folks as far as,
right,
updates on summer basketball.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay. We'll talk to you.
All right.